Well, Neal, when we first met years ago, you were the chief product officer of YouTube. And we met because I was doing a podcast and series of stories about YouTube and how people were getting radicalized through their recommendations, which I'm sure you loved. And now you are the CEO, and a lot else has changed. There was a pandemic, been a couple elections, and YouTube is...
You know what I remember about those, Kevin, is your background.
Yeah?
The Microsoft Windows.
Oh yeah, I have on my home office, I had the Windows XP bliss.
For some reason, that was the background.
Yeah, and the most important change from my perspective over the past few years is that I'm now a father. So I have a 3-year-old.
Congrats.
And thank you. He's very into Blippi and other YouTube kids creators. And I probably don't have to tell you that there are a lot of parents out there who are spending a lot of time thinking and worrying about YouTube. And I'm going to ask you some tough questions about that in the hopes that we can sort of get it all sorted today, and then I don't have to come back and make another podcast.
Perfect.
So here are some statistics. According to recent research, nearly 3/4 of teens say they use YouTube daily, and the average child aged 2 to 12 years old watches 106 minutes of YouTube daily. What do you think when you hear those numbers?
Well, I don't know the specific numbers or where that research came from. We are a platform. I mean, we're a large media platform. You know, especially young people, when they turn on the television, they're turning on YouTube often. I think you all might have seen some of the stats, whether we're talking about kids or the general population. We're the #1 streaming platform. Most of our content is consumed on television screens in the U.S., and so we do recognize that especially young people, when they're turning on their TVs, they are often turning on YouTube. And in a general sense, that's why, knowing that we're a platform, particularly that young people of all kind of age buckets use, is why we're so focused on making sure that we're also a platform where that not only are they discovering new content, new creativity, but they're doing it in a safe manner, and also one where we're doing that in partnership with parents. And so we are, I think, really the first, and I think until even today, the only platform that has differentiated experiences. For your son, the appropriate experience on YouTube might be YouTube Kids, which is a standalone app. It's the 10-year anniversary of YouTube Kids. It's something that we invested in very early on, with this recognition that the developmental needs and therefore parental controls required for young children is very different than it is for preteens and then teens, of course. On the main app, we have something called supervised experiences. Again, the idea being that families and parents are in the best position to make choices for the young people in their homes. So building in parental controls, default settings, and things like that has generally been our approach to how we think about making sure that kids have all the amazing opportunities on YouTube. It is the #1 learning platform. I think, as you all know, 94% of teachers all over the world use YouTube in the classroom every single day. So we want to have those opportunities, but we want to do it in a way where families and parents have control.
Yeah, I love YouTube. I watch probably more than 106 minutes a day on average.
What do you like to
more
watch?
than my son. Oh, sports, poker videos, you name it. But I think a lot of parents, especially those with young kids, have some hesitation about letting their kids watch YouTube. Or when we talk about it, we do so in kind of hushed tones, in a way that I don't think we do with Netflix or Disney Plus or another sort of more contained streamer. What do you think the source of that anxiety is?
As you know, I have 3 kids myself. They're a little bit older than yours, but I've been on that journey. My wife and I have been on that journey, just like you, as a parent. And I think that some of it just harkens back to when we were young as well, which is all of those media platforms, sources of video content, et cetera, have to be done in a way where parents have some control over it.
Right.
Moderation.
And adults always think that whatever technology is in vogue is melting the kids' brains, right? Like that is something that has been true throughout history. But it does seem like to me that the thing that worries me about YouTube for my son, who is younger than most of your users, is not that it's like leading him in some dark direction. It's actually just that a lot of the content that he watches and likes to watch is not very high quality. Like, I'll come back and he'll have his iPad, and after half an hour, he'll be watching some German video where it's just trains, or a video of video game footage of Spider-Man, riding a monster truck or something like that. So how do you think about your responsibility to kind of raise the floor of quality for children's programming?
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely think it is a really important effort. And remember, on the flip side of it are amazing kids content creators who are looking for not just an audience amongst families, but also a way to actually earn a sustainable living on to produce all of that amazing content. And so those are the two things we do, which is connect amazing, kids-oriented creators with families, and also help them ultimately earn a living so that they can continue to produce that type of content. And so there's a number of things that we have done really in that regard. The first is what you said, which is content that's recommended to your son, to my kids, to all of our children. We should take into account how that's being done. And so we invest very heavily in that recommendation framework. For example, one of the things that you all may know is that we make sure that content that is repetitive around certain types of topics, like, for example, maybe not relevant in the case of your kid, but for older kids around things like body image and things like that, is dispersed in terms of recommendations. So just those very subtle things, but as you know, as you've written about deeply from your in-depth sort of research on algorithms and things like that, really matter to the kids' experience. So that's one. The second is investing in the production of high-quality content. As I said, it takes a lot of effort and creativity to produce that content. How do we create that type of a framework? We just announced, actually, a couple weeks ago, partnership with a number of leading organizations that produce media for children around having frameworks, guidelines, and a support mechanism for producing high-value content. Creators like Miss Rachel, who have had enormous success on YouTube, Sal, right, Khan Academy, all started on YouTube. And so those are the types of efforts
so this
that
was
we look
your
for.
Youth Digital Wellbeing Initiative. Is that the same thing?
Yes.
Yeah, so I saw that, and I was interested in that because it includes the company that makes Blippi and Coco Melon, which are my son's drugs of choice. So when you talk about incentivizing those creators to make high-value content, what does that mean? Who's judging what it means to be high value? And what kinds of feedback are they saying? I can imagine, for instance, someone, a kids creator saying, well, I could make like a very dry educational show, but it's not going to get as many views as my normal thing, whatever that normal thing is.
Yeah, I think that sort of dichotomy is false, Kevin. I think there is ways to produce, and I'm sure there are many people in the audience who think about this every day, highly engaging, super creative content that's also nutritional for young people. And that's really the purpose behind that initiative. And I think, the partners that we have a number of partners that have reached out after that, including people who've been in the business of producing this type of content, educational content for young people for decades. And so to your original question, a few things. First is, I don't set those standards. I'm not a child development expert, but we do work with lots of people who are, third parties that do that, parents groups, child development groups. And it goes all back to this sort of ethos, which is like, there are creators who are looking to do the right thing, build a business, but also to do the right thing in terms of their mission of serving kids. And giving them framework, giving them guidelines, giving them advice to do that is really important. The other thing that's really important is also providing economic opportunities for them, the ability to actually make money so that they can continue to do that. And so those are the types of things that we focus on. That's what I hear from our creators and our partners all the time, and that's what we're going to continue to invest in. One of the things that's not lost on us is, for kids and parents and families, we are the largest and most important learning platform for them. Not just in the classroom, not just what's being used by their teachers, but I see this in my own household, I'm sure you all do. It's the platform that kids, especially teens, say is the last one they will remove because it's the number one place that they go to learn.
And also waste time.
And so we invest, for example, with Common Sense Media, actually, Jim has been a leader in this regard in terms of leading the way in terms of actually helping us develop a corpus of content. I always describe YouTube as this kind of vast library of incredibly rich content, whether it's algebra, whether it's how to ride a bike, and everything in between. The one challenge we have, one of the biggest challenges, is actually presenting it in an organized fashion. So we have this partnership with Common Sense Media where Common Sense is actually going to bring its expertise to curate this content. We're going to start with math for middle school kids because we know obviously that's a pivotal point for math and kids, especially as they get into the high school years, and curate that content. Put it in the classroom for teachers. Teachers ask us for this all the time, but also make it available to young people and families in their homes.
I'm curious, Neal, how you measure success when it comes to content that is aimed at young audiences. I mean, I know from reporting on sort of YouTube for adults that one of the metrics that you all track very closely is watch time, and that's sort of a North Star, or at least was for a long time, in how you thought about your product and whether a given change to your algorithm would produce more or less watch time. How do you measure that for kids? Is watch time still the thing you're trying to optimize?
I mean, look, none of this is relevant if it's not something that is actually going to engage kids around learning or whatever the use case is. But a lot of it goes back to what I said. How many hours of learning content is being consumed on our platform every day? It happens to be a very large amount. How many hours of content that is part of these sorts of these well-being initiatives, these partnerships that we have, for example, with CSM. And so we look at all of these types of things. And the other thing is actually just direct feedback from parents, from teachers. So all of that goes into whether we're living up to our mission to be a platform that is on balance a place where kids can learn, build connection, build community. And so that's sort of the way that I look at it. And we have a team that's actually focused on building products and supporting creators around this type of content.
Yeah, I think that's really smart, by the way. I think, one thing that parents could be thinking is like, well, why don't they just have the YouTube creators who are already popular with kids, the Mr. Beasts, the people who have large followings among young people? Why not just sort of incentivize those people to make higher value, more educational content? Is that something that you're also exploring?
Well, we have lots of creators that do that today. I mean, one of the ones, I mentioned for young kids, Miss Rachel. We have creators like Art for Kids for older kids. We have creators that produce amazing content like Crash Course, Hank and John Green, that do it in the university setting. So it really covers the full spectrum. There's, of course, creators, in the Bay Area like Mark Rober, who produces amazing science content, particularly targeted at that sort of preteen and teen use case. And it's, when I talk to parents, like, those are the types of examples that they bring up to me. And what we're really proud of at YouTube is that not only have we allowed Mark to do that, a former NASA engineer, scientist whose passion is to actually educate kids, get them excited about science, not only have we let him build a following of tens of millions of subscribers, but actually earn a living doing that, and therefore produce incredibly rich content in a way that's sustainable, that works for parents, works for teachers, but in particularly works for young people, for kids.
What is the number one complaint you get from parents about YouTube?
I think, a lot of the times, to be honest, like when I have conversations with parents, a lot of it is they first and foremost give me examples, not about sort of YouTube, the product, or what features or what have you. It's about creators that they love or that their kids love. And so I hear about people like Mark and things like that.
That's a complaint you hear?
No, that's... the reason I'm saying that is because your premise was that it was going to be a complaint. And what I'm pointing out is that
people complain to me all the time about the New York Times. I'm saying, if you have a job like yours, people complain all the time. So right. Is it my kid won't stop watching YouTube? How could I get them off their iPad and outside? Like, what do you hear from parents?
It's oftentimes more things like, I wish there were more content that look like this or more content that look like that. So it's really around those types of things. Or my kid is really into XYZ, and as you all know, whatever sort of niche interest that you have, you can generally find some type of content around that on YouTube. And so I think parents are no different. Those are the types of things that they ask me for, which is like, oh, my son is really into XYZ. I hope there ends up being more creators that do XYZ type of a thing, whether it's like, building these types of Legos or, experimenting with this type of, whatever, Play-Doh or what have you, that kind of a thing. I do have, even in my household, a lot of the conversation, again, with all of these types of tools and capabilities is just how do you do that in a way where you have moderation, really. That's, I think, at least in our household, that's always the question that my wife and I talk about. And so, again, that's why going back to where this conversation started, having things like parental controls and the like, I think is really important.
Yeah, I have some friends with slightly older kids who tell me that their big struggle is keeping their kids on YouTube Kids and not having them use the main app. Have you all done anything? I heard you're doing something with AI to try to figure out how old people might be and sort of direct them to the right app. Can you tell me more about that? Or how are you trying to keep really young kids off the YouTube main app and direct them to YouTube Kids?
Again, we have three kids in all different ranges. And generally speaking, the way I think about it, YouTube Kids is an app that I think is frankly suitable all the way up to, kids sort of right up to sort of the preteen sort of tween type of boundary. We saw that, and I see that in the experience of our own daughter in terms of when they're interested and, frankly, sort of developmentally ready for that sort of broader corpus that exists on the main app. The main thing that we've done, actually, and it's been a few years now, is introduce this concept of supervised experiences on the main app. And so the idea there is that when the kid or the parents are ready for their children to move on to the main YouTube app, whether they're watching it on their TVs or tablets or what have you, then having a supervised experience over it, where, for example, they can decide what type of corpus of content feels comfortable to them as a family. What are the default settings, right? Things like default timers on and that sort of a thing. And so that's really probably the most important thing from the YouTube Kids boundary to the main app.
Yeah. Well, I think we are almost out of time, but I wanted to give one more free idea for YouTube. There was a great story by my colleague John Coblin in the New York Times this week about how Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit that runs Sesame Street, is facing some hard times. They've lost some funding. Their deal with HBO is almost up. What about YouTube buying Sesame Workshop?
You've got a career as an investment banker on the side there as well.
All right, Neal, thank you so much for your time.